Okay, today we pick up our story in John, the 4th chapter. And last couple of classes we've been talking about the woman at the well. And so today, that's where we began to see what happens now in that respect. Okay, here is where Jesus is what John has told us about. That in chapter 4, Jesus heads back to the end there to go back up into Galilee where he's from. That's where he met the woman of Samaria at that well, Jacob's well there. Then, after this encounter with the woman, he proceeds on into Galilee. And that's what we're going to be studying about today, is how he goes on up into Galilee. And so in John 4 and down in verse 43 is where we will begin our lesson today. It said, and after 2 days he went forth from thence, that would be from the woman at the well, into Galilee. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. Now, when you go up here to this, why, it just says that he went up, and he really didn't tell us where he went. But if you go back to the synoptics, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, remember the synoptics, they tell you in detail what Jesus did up in Galilee. Now the Gospel of John talks about what he did down in Judea. And so John is not going to tell us much about what Jesus did when he got back up there. But if we go over to Matthew 4, which we'll not, I'm just referencing it, why it says he went back up to Nazareth. That's where he went because that was his hometown of where he was really from. He went up there, but he didn't stay very long, for he himself testified that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. So he left there, and he went then, it says, down into Galilee. Now here's an interesting thing. Nazareth is in Galilee. That whole area up there is the Galilean area. But he left, and it says, he didn't say left Nazareth, it just said, and when he came into Galilee, the Galileans received him. Well, what actually he did, according to Matthew, is that he left up there because a prophet hath no honor in his own country, and that's where he's from. So he went down to Capernaum. Now Capernaum is where he's going to make his home. So let's keep this in mind. Jesus' mother and father lived in Nazareth. That was his hometown. That is where he was reared. And now as he starts out at about 30 years of age, goes out and starts preaching, he now is going to shift his, shall we say, home base. I don't guess you can ever get rid of your hometown, but he's going to shift it, and he's going to move down to Capernaum. Now, obviously, the reason he's going to be doing this is because this is where the center of population is. Nazareth is up in the mountains. And there's a place up there called Nazareth, and then there's the Cana that got up there. But it's not a highly populated area. There's a big Roman town that's up there. But as far as Jews are concerned, well, there's not much. So he moves on down then there. Then he says, and when he came into Galilee, that's going to be back down in Capernaum, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things that he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they went unto the feast. Now, this takes us back to this period of time that Jesus was down in Judea. Now, he was down there, even though it doesn't seem like it as we're studying the book of John, he was down there for a total of 8 months. And it says he went all the way through Judea, and he worked all of these various miracles that were down there, and people saw him. And so the people from Judea, from Galilee, they had gone down to Jerusalem, and they had seen many of these, and so he became very popular then with them. Now, it goes ahead and it says, he came therefore again unto Cana of Galilee. So he went from Nazareth over to Capernaum. Then he went from Capernaum back up to Cana. Now, it doesn't tell us why he went up there, but it says he did. So he went up to Cana, Galilee, where he had made water wine. That's where he had done his first miracle. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Jesus therefore said unto him, Except you see signs and wonders, you will on no wise believe. The nobleman saith unto him, Sir, come down ere my child die. Now, the nobleman, that is the Roman officer in the army there, he had heard that Jesus come up. His son was very sick, and he did what any loving father would do whose son is about to die. He began to search him out because he had heard that this man could heal the sick. So he goes up, and here's an interesting, just a little interesting tidbit, because later it'll come out a different way. Not in a different way, but later it'll come out with different people there. That he goes up and he says, Sir, come down, my son is about to die. Now, isn't that what you would say? In other words, if you called a doctor and you finally, not having a telephone, chased him down and found him somewhere in Monroe, why, you would say, come and see my son. Right? And so you'd want him to come. Now then, Jesus made a point of this. And Jesus asks questions and does things that the normal person wouldn't do. So what Jesus said is, he said, except you see signs and wonders, you'll not believe here. So he's challenging him in there. Now Jesus said to the man then, Go thy way, thy son liveth. The man believed the word that Jesus spake unto him, and he went his way. So here now is an interesting miracle. That Jesus now is going to heal a person far, far away, several miles away through mountainous country. And so Jesus tells him, okay, you go back home, your son lives. And he just made the statement that that's what's happening. Right now, going back, your son is living there. And the man believed him. So here now we have a Gentile that has this kind of faith in Jesus, and he believed him, the word, and he went his way. Now here's an interesting thing, that as he went up, this line means the guy went up to see him. Now then, the nobleman is heading back home, and his servants from Capernaum, they're heading up to Canaan to get the nobleman. So they met somewhere halfway. And that's where you start in verse 51. And as he was going down, his servants met him, saying that his son lived. So he inquired of them the hour in which he began to amend. Now, if you put yourself in his shoes, this certainly is what anybody would do, and they would do it with great excitement. Now, as he's going back down, I have no idea what he's thinking in his mind. This has never been done before. Nobody has ever done this. So what would he be thinking? In other words, when Jesus is up there and says, you go back, your son lives. Okay. So he heads back. What's he thinking? Is he thinking that his son is already healed? Is he thinking that when his son is starting to get better, and when he gets back after a period of time, the son will recover and the son then will be well? What is he thinking? Now, the only thing I know is he doesn't know, and he's thinking, and he's wondering. So when he meets them, and they said, your son lives, that's exciting news, because his son was dying. He was in the process of dying. He was almost dead. Now then they describe it, your son lives. And then he asked this question that we all would ask. What time did this happen? In other words, he started out and he says there he inquired of them the hour which he began to amend or get well. Now this is, again, what I would do, what you would do. What time was it? What time was it when he took a change and his fever started leaving him and he started getting better? Of when his fever left. What time was when he started to get well? We would all take it as a normal process like that. And they said therefore unto him, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. He didn't start getting better. He just got well. He was just healed. Bang. And it happened yesterday at the 7th hour. So the father knew that it was at that hour in which Jesus said unto him, thy son liveth. And himself believed in his whole house. And this is again the second sign that Jesus did, having come out of Judea into Galilee. So it was a immediate healing. That's the point I want to make. It was immediate healing. And the nobleman, of course, wouldn't be looking for this, as none of us would be looking for it. And so that had a great impact on him. Now, the reason I'm kind of going into this is because Jesus is now preaching. He has 3 years to convince the Jewish nation he is the Son of God. And how does he go about convincing them? Well, it's by the life he lives, by the teaching he gives them, and by the miracles that he performs. Those miracles are going to be the things that convince these people that he's not just a human being, that he is divine. So here now is a tremendous miracle, and it's a different kind. Now he's healed, from what we read in here, he's healed many, many, many people. A number of people he's healed. But this one now, he's healed being away from the individual. All right. Now then, John covers that in his gospel, chapter 4. And now then, he is getting ready to go back in chapter 5. He's going to head back down to Jerusalem. Now, let's look at this again here. Since we're studying the Gospel of John, this period in Galilee seems very short because he doesn't deal with the things that Jesus did in Galilee during this 4 months. Now, he's going to be up there for a 4-month period of time. And yet, John doesn't deal with it. The only thing John deals with is this story here about how he healed this nobleman's son. But I've got down there for our class here, let us look at what really happened in Galilee according to the synoptics. Now, if we go back to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we can learn certain things. The Galilean ministry was 4 months long, and you'd have to read everything from Matthew 4:12 to Matthew 14:12 to see what he did. So Matthew has a big chunk of his gospel that's telling what Jesus did up there. This is what we mean when we say the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they tell mainly what happened up in Galilee, but John skips that since they've told it, and he deals with what Jesus did down in Jerusalem there. Now, Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us many things he did before returning there. John skips this several months period of time. Now, here are some things Jesus did, just for our interest this morning. We're not going to go into detail in them, but here's some things he did up there before he goes back that John didn't tell us about. And leaving Nazareth, he came to dwell in Capernaum, which is by the seacoast, down there among all these people and preaching, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw 2 brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. Now, this is interesting. Because you say, okay, Let's go back to John 1. Remember that these were some of the first men that Jesus contacted? Do you remember back there in John 1 where John the Baptist was out baptizing and Jesus came and he said, "Behold the Lamb of God." And then there were a couple of those disciples that were there, John's disciples, and they went and talked with Jesus. And then one of them was Andrew. And Andrew ran and got Peter and brought Peter with him. And Peter came over. And then they started following Jesus. And they would go back up there with him. So hasn't he already called Peter and Andrew and James, here the son of Alphaeus, and John, as we'll see in just a minute? No. He has met them. He has made their acquaintance. They now know him. They've been following him some. They're convinced that John the Baptist says he's the Lamb of God, he's the Son of God. And they went back up, but they went back fishing. When Jesus went back up to Nazareth and so forth, they then went back to their livelihood. They went back to make a living at what they had always done. He had not yet told them, "Follow me, and I'm going to make you one of my apostles. I'll make you fishers of men." And so Jesus, up to this time then, has been traveling around here by himself and doing this with whoever it is that is along with him. But he comes down to the sea, which is where Peter and Andrew made their living, and he looked out and he saw them. And then he called out to them, and he said to them, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." And they straightway left their nets and followed him. Now this explains a little bit about something that we would wonder about. As you read the story of Jesus, you see that he just walking along the sea. He sees a fisherman out there, a couple guys in a fishing boat, and he yells out and he said, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." And they just rowed in, left their boat, and followed him. Who in the world would do such a thing as that? Is that sensible? Would you say that that is the way it happened? You'd say, well, what in the world is wrong with those two guys? A stranger coming along and saying, "Follow me," and they just left their boats, left their business, turned it over to somebody else, and followed him. You see, they had already known Jesus. It's now been a year since Jesus has started his ministry. And they got acquainted with him back there. They know him. They have followed him. They've kept in contact to whatever it is of all the stuff that he has been doing. But up to this time, he hasn't said, "I want you to be one of my 12 apostles." So what do? They go back to work. So now then, after about a year of them being acquainted with Jesus, hearing about all the things he did, seeing miracles that he has performed, when he comes along and says, "Follow me. Now's the time, fellas. Now's the time. We got acquainted a year ago. Follow me. And I'm going to make you fishers of men instead of fishers of fish." They followed him. Then it says, 21, "And going on from thence, he saw two other brethren, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him." Same story. See, this would not have happened had it just been some stranger coming along and telling people he didn't know and they didn't know him, "Follow me," and they just give up their business. But these guys have known Jesus now for about a year's time. So I'm kind of emphasizing that because as we just read a lot of times in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, why we get the impression, well, Jesus just said, "Follow me," and they just gave up everything and came and followed him. No, it's been in the normal normal way that human beings would do these things. Okay. Then it says, Jesus went about all Galilee. So now you see, John doesn't touch any of this. That's what we're saying. John deals with what happened down in Jerusalem. But now he went throughout all Galilee. Now that would be in that country there that I've put a kind of a light around. He went all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the kingdom of the gospel and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. So, you see, Jesus now is doing lots and lots and lots of miracles. And he's doing all kind of miracles. And his fame went throughout all Syria. And they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with divers diseases and torments, and those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them. In other words, there were no sick people went away. He healed everybody that came. Then verse 25. And there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee, and from Decapolis, and from Jerusalem, and from Judea, and from Jordan. Now, I'm emphasizing and just going back, and we're about through with this, but I just want you to see that as we're studying John, it appears that Jesus left Judea, went up to Nazareth, did a couple things, came back down to Judea, because John deals with what's going to happen down there. We're getting ready to get into that. But Jesus did a lot of things up there during this 4-month period of time that John doesn't tell us about. And so down there that I've colored in purple, it gives us an idea now of what kind of reputation Jesus has at this point. Great multitudes from up in that country. And it says from the Decapolis. Now the Decapolis is that period of time that period or place that's over on the what you'd see on your screen, the right-hand side of the Sea of Galilee, right underneath where I've lightened it there. All along that sea, right there, that side, that belongs to Gentiles. That's called the Decapolis. The Deca is 10, and polis is city, and so the Decapolis is the 10 cities. So there were your 10 major cities that belonged to Rome, and the Jews stayed out of that area. They didn't go into that area. But Jesus went in there and was preaching. Now that, of course, is the area, when he went in and he healed the man of all of the demons, and they went into the swine, and 2,000 swine went down and went into the sea and killed himself. So Jesus now is getting a tremendous reputation. His reputation now is really coming out there. At this time, while he's up there, he healed that leper, of which nobody had ever healed a leper. History tells us, the Jewish books say that it had never been done before. And now then, before he leaves, he calls Matthew to follow him. Again, in Matthew. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." So he arose and followed him. Now, of course, here you've got your same story. Why would anybody who has a tax business going like this just get up and follow Jesus? Well, he knows about Jesus. Jesus has done all of these miracles just over and over again. All kind of miracles everywhere throughout the country. It's not just somebody walking along and saying, "Follow me." So now what we have is we have Andrew, Philip, Peter, Nathaniel, James, John, and Matthew that he's called. That means that later he's going to call Bartholomew and Thomas and Thaddeus and Simon and Judas Iscariot. So he'll call them, but that won't be in an obvious way like he's called these particular men here. But here we have it now, ready to go. So now we're back at the Gospel of John. So we today talking about, started out in chapter 4. Now we're getting ready to go into chapter 5. But you remember this chart that I gave you back in our first class, how that John builds his whole gospel around 6 Jewish feasts. And so in John 2:13, you have him starting. In John 5:1, where we are today, in just a minute, this is the second feast he's going down to. And then you have on there, and so you have the 3 years. But back here, I put yellow in this circle, and this is a 1-year period of time. Now, during this 1-year period of time, what we've looked at is that there's 8 months down in Judea. That's the part that John has covered so far. Then Jesus went up, and there's 4 months he spent up in Galilee, and that's the period that we've been talking about this morning. So now, he's getting ready to go back down to Judea, to the Passover down there, for the second time now that he's going. So now he returns to Judea. Remember, he goes down, gets there, gets to Jerusalem, and it said, and after this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now I've emphasized that because I spent a lot of time in chapter 1 talking about, is that the feast of the Passover or is that another feast? Well, you can argue about it until the cows come home, and nobody knows. That's it. But it's generally thought to be the feast of the Passover because that's the most important feast that they had. And so people generally attribute it to that. And so now he went up there, and he came then to a place there, going through the sheep gate, came to a place, a pool, which is called Bethsaida, having 5 porches. I put that in red because just recently, archaeologists digging up in this pool, and they found 5 porches. And that is 5 overheads that was over the pool. And this was totally abnormal because all the other pools had 4. It was just a normal way of making these things, and they would have 4. But it said had 5, and now they just dug them up, and it's been about a year ago now that they found it. What do you know? It has 5, just like John said. Now, this pool of Bethsaida, in chapter 5, verse 2, here's a picture of it. I took this picture, obviously, standing up at the top and taking a picture down. So it's down there kind of deep. Now, there's 2 words we get mixed up. Let me back up. You guys probably don't ever get them mixed up, but I do. Here are 2 words. One is over there, Bethsaida, which we're talking about now, the pool. That's what it's called. And that word means house of mercy. And it's located right down in Jerusalem. Now, when you see a Hebrew word or a Bible word that starts out with B-E-T-H, that word means house. So it'll be the house of whatever it is. The rest of that word means mercy. Beth-El. El is God. That means the house of God. So you see the B-E-T-H. Now over here, Bethsaida, that is a city up there right north of the Sea of Galilee, and that's the home of Peter and Andrew and James and John and so forth. They lived up there. And it's called, that means it's the house of fishing. So these are 2 separate words. Now, notice the narrow steps that got that red arrow going up there. That's the steps that this lame man's going to have to come down. And so in chapter 5, why he's going to mention there, Jesus comes along, and he asked him, is anybody, you want to be healed? And he said, sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming down another steps down before me. So he said, I can't get down there. Every time that water is stirred up, where you can get healed, somebody jumps in front of me. Now, the stirring up of the water evidently is a custom of what they say. There's nothing about it anywhere in history or in the Bible that actually works. But we're just assuming that what they say is that when something happens in this spring that comes up, and the water starts stirring up, which many springs do, they say that's when, if you get in there, you can be healed. And that's what the man was trying to get in there to do. But let us now go back to the Gospel of John in chapter 5 and read this particular section right here real quickly. And verse 2. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a multitude of them that were sick, blind, halt, and withered. And a certain man was there who had been 38 years in his infirmity. When Jesus saw him lying and knew that he had been there a long time, in that case, he saith unto him, Wouldest thou be made whole? Do you want to be healed? The man looked up at him, and as far as he knew, Jesus was just another Jew. And the sick man answered, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Arise, take up thy bed and walk. And straightway the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. So now, as this man is trying to get down these steps, any time that the water started bubbling, he'd try it, somebody else would jump in front of him and keep him from moving. And so Jesus said, Do you want to be healed? And well, I can't get down there. And so Jesus said, Take up your bed and walk. Well, a couple of things. Number one, take up your bed. Now, if I told you that today, I want you to take up your bed and come to services tonight. Why, you would think I'm crazy. Because the beds we have today is not like the beds they had back there. The bed they had back there is just what we would call a pad. It's just a sleeping pad, and you roll it up, and sometimes it wouldn't be any thicker than just a quilt as we know it, and so a covering. So it said, take up your bed. So he'd get up, he'd roll this thing up, but the point is that he got up, just immediately got up, and he was healed. Now, where are we again? We're in Jerusalem. What part of Jerusalem? Downtown Jerusalem. And Jesus now has healed this man. Now, how many Jews are there around? It's the feast. So there are Jews from all over the nation, all over the world have come in. So the city is packed. We're in Jerusalem. A man has been healed. He has had this infirmity for 38 years. Everybody knows about it. And so now this is going to cause quite a stir in downtown Jerusalem. We'll pick up our story next week.